Welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We are here with Brad Smith, who can help you uncover the content marketing secrets of 10-figure brands. Brad Smith is the CEO of Wordable and Codeless. He helps 10-figure brands like Monday.com or Nextiva dominate categories with content marketing at a massive scale. Brad, super glad to be talking to you.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, likewise.
And so you have these three companies that you run, and you do all kinds of different things. And I'm sure you always wonder like where to find time to sleep and how to focus and things like that. But what has been your passion in the last 6 months or so? What has you fired up?
The last 6 months or so, we have been rebuilding and relaunching Wordable, which has been interesting, as you can imagine. It's always a challenge to rebuild something from scratch. So that's been really interesting. I did some traveling too, so maybe that's a little outside of all this nerdy content stuff, but I did a big road trip not too long ago across the US, which is a lot of fun with my family. So yeah, this just more interesting projects and more ways to spend time with family is kind of like at the top of my mind, I guess.
Well, doing everything, because like the thing that has been on my mind lately is, we're all going to get old. You'll get old, I'll get old. and hopefully that's a long time from now. And hopefully like when we're old, we have a good quality of life, but there's no guarantees. And you never know if you might have some, physical ailment, or if you won't feel good, or if you'll have brain fog. And so I've just been really kind of like reminding myself a lot recently, especially of like, if my health is good, if I can think, if I can do things, I should be grateful for what I have, because a lot of people, don't have those things, or a lot of people struggle a lot more than I think I struggle. So it's good that you find the time to spend that family time and travel where you want to travel. And so, all right, so Wordable, can you tell me about that and tell me about, what it does, what problem it solves, and how it's unique?
For sure. Yeah. So we were actually a customer of Wordable and have used it for a while. Basically, it helps move content from historically Google Docs to WordPress. So we do this under our content agency, Codeless. We have like 300 articles a month. It takes roughly 30 to 60 minutes to upload, format, optimize every single piece of content. So times 300 a month, times whatever we're paying people to do that. And it ends up being a lot of tedious recurring stuff. So our hope with Wordable is to basically automate all that stuff for you. So that way it kind of cleans the code, the format, and it looks exactly like it should, based on like what you guys were just working on and getting approved in Google Docs. We still use Google Docs with all these huge brands we work with, just because it's the easiest, it's best for collaboration. But then also take care of some of the like on-page optimization. So all the sucky stuff, for lack of a better word, you have to do like once you jump into your website to like make sure a piece of content actually looks good enough to publish. So Wordable is going to eventually kind of automate that whole process, hopefully.
Well, cool. So just to make sure that I kind of have my head wrapped around this, so with Word, I mean, like you said, like Google Docs is pretty cool as far as having a lot of people collaborate. And I think that WordPress, that over the last few years, they've tried to make it easy with like the revisions and multiple people jumping in. But I don't know about you, Brad, but whenever I go to edit a WordPress post, or some scary things saying like someone else is already editing it, and do you want to override or do you want to lock it? And I thought, well, I thought the point of the collaboration was that I could like see someone else changing it and I can do it. And like you said, like Google Docs is great for creating it, but then when I want to go and publish it, it reminds me of the days of having a Word document and needing to put it into HTML, and you feel almost like you're starting from scratch as far as all the formatting. So I can see the headache. And so how does Wordable work exactly? Is it like a plugin? Does it make it one click? Like how does this whole process work?
Yeah. For WordPress, it is a plugin. For some of the other content management systems we're adding, like HubSpot, Contentful, eventually Shopify, BigCommerce, a lot of those platforms are thankfully a lot more modern in terms of how we can connect and integrate with them. WordPress is still a plugin, but essentially it's kind of that. It's you go into the app, you say, okay, let me bring in all the documents I was just working on. Like to your point, I always say WordPress is good for everything except for writing in. I've done a lot of freelance writing, and it's awful to do like your actual work, especially if you're doing like multi-thousand word articles with images and all this other heavy stuff. It's painful, and so we often approve things or get things approved in Google Docs or some other format. Writers like to write in some place where it's easy, it's distraction free. It kind of suits them best, and so we're basically grabbing those documents wherever they live, wherever they are, and then importing them into, like in this case, Wordable or any other CMS, And we're cleaning the code is a big one. So if you just copy and paste a Google Doc into WordPress, you get a lot of like these extra span tags, a lot of other messy, crappy code. It doesn't properly move. Some of the formatting doesn't properly move either when you copy and paste stuff like that. It doesn't move images. So you usually have to, in Google Docs, you have to go to like export as an HTML file, and then you have to go grab all the images and then manually upload those and then go insert them back into the post. So there's all these like additional steps people have to do to solve this problem. And frankly, it's kind of crazy that there's no better solution already out there. And so that's what we're hoping to do with Wordable, is to kind of like automate everything for everyone.
And did I hear you correctly that you said you were a customer of theirs and then you bought them out, or did I hear that wrong?
Yeah. So we actually know the people originally created it, Benji and Devesh from Grow and Convert, another content agency. They started it in 2016, I think. We were a customer probably like pretty early on around then, and then they sold it to another person, a year or two later, and then that owner held it up until last year when we saw it go up for sale. And then we, like I said, we were a customer, and we use it for all of our WordPress-based client sites, but we do have a bunch of other, clients on a bunch of other tools. And so that's why we're hoping to kind of like build it out now and evolve it a lot more to add pretty much every major website platform.
And that's a really cool story, because like I think about, there are like a handful of software tools that I use that like I feel like I'm like one of the biggest fans of. And yep. I'm like, I feel like they owe me a commission for how much I just like talk up what I do and how much it's like embedded into my business. So that's cool that you used it so much that when it went up for sale, you said you'd be crazy to not grab it, because who knows if someone else will get it. And now you have the chance to add the features that you always wanted to do, because that's always a problem too. When you use a tool, use a platform, and you love it so much and use it for everything, you're like, I wish they just did these extra 3 things, and they just won't budge. They just won't do it. So that's cool that worked out for you. And so how long has it been since you acquired it? And like, what's the difference between Wordable before you and what you've added since you've been in charge?
For sure. We acquired it a little over a year ago. So like last summer, or like last early summer. We were always going to rebuild it kind of from the beginning, because a lot of the existing logic and everything was still tied very much to Google Docs and very much to WordPress. And one of the big reasons we wanted to acquire it and kind of like continue working on it was just that problem that we have clients on Contentful that are all these new headless CMSs like Contentful and Craft and Ghost. You have Webflow coming up. You have BigCommerce and Shopify, like a huge e-commerce space that doesn't really have any good options for this. And so that was always one of the big things. And then we always, even after moving a document over, we still found ourselves having to jump into that client or our own websites and still do like 5 to 10 other things. So to optimize like a piece of content properly, you need to compress your images. You don't want images to be like massive file sizes to slow down your website. You don't want on those images themselves, you want to make sure you're adding alt text and other things for like web accessibility, but also for search engines. So there's like all these additional little steps, sometimes even like opening external links in a new tab, so that window opens like in another browser window or another tab, and you're able to keep people kind of on the page on the site. So there's all these like little dumb recurring tasks that you need to do that might take a minute or 2 minutes each time, but when you're doing it across like 10 links per article or 10 images per article, and then you're doing a ton of articles, you can imagine that stuff like really adds up. So the plan was always to kind of rebuild it from scratch, add all these things, really kind of evolve what we're doing, and some other kind of cool stuff in the works. But yeah, I think it's a very kind of easy ROI if you're working on a ton of content like we are. We probably spend thousands, like no joke, thousands of dollars on people just having to manually do this stuff, and they don't like doing it. It's not the most fun task in the world either. And so we're hoping that it should be kind of a win-win for content teams and also the people doing the work, so they can kind of do more important stuff with their day, not just like have to mess around with WordPress and get things like formatted exactly right.
Well, and that's the whole point of software in general, right? It's to replace a manual or repetitive task done by a person, so that way it can be done automatically. I mean, it's like, I remember when I was a kid and I was like 6 years old and my parents let me play with a typewriter, and you type things on a page. And if one little thing was wrong, then guess what? You had to start completely from scratch and go back to the typewriter. And then nowadays we have word processors, and now you can just do one quick thing and now it's fixed. And in your story there, what came to mind is that whole eating your own dog food programming concept, where it's like, well, you have a piece of software, And sure, they might have like tutorial videos, but
Yeah.
it's usually sort of like feature based, like tab based, like, hey,
Yeah.
isn't it great that we let you do this? Isn't it great that we let you do that? And then usually when you like go deep into like a software tool, then the tutorial videos only get you so far. And then maybe you
Yeah.
run the message boards, or then you might buy like a course or something. And the course is usually saying, well, here's how to use this tool, but then also for the features it lacks, here's this other solution, and here's this like second tool you might have to use, and here's some things to watch out for, things to do, not to do. And it just kind of seemed like when you were explaining that whole process there of having to, move images, compress images, set links to open it in new windows. It brought to mind all of those kind of missing features that if there was a course on Wordable before you came along, it might, spend hours just explaining all that, saying, well, you'd have to run over here to do this or run over to do that. And it's like, why not just roll it all into the software? And it's also cool that you kind of found all these new, like, universes to tap into, right? All the other CMSs. And now that way you're not just stuck in WordPress. And so many cool things going on. But have there been any difficulties? Because like, you're talking about software where like a million things could go wrong, and people, even more things go wrong. So what kind of difficulties have you experienced in the past year growing this thing?
Yeah, for sure. So when we originally relaunched it, the historical customer base has been a lot of, you do get like content managers and stuff, but you also get a lot of writers, a lot of editors. That's great. I think they can still use the new version of Wordable, but we're also trying, I think the bigger pain point and the bigger people, the people that experience this problem the most are similar to us, in that they're agencies or they're larger marketing teams with like a team of writers. And so we're used to managing content in bulk. And so we're thinking of like, how do we help teams like that? And how do we kind of like change, how things were done previously, as far as like how people actually use the tool. And as you can imagine, existing customers don't like change. That's an understatement. So I think that was a big challenge and a big oversight, especially on my part, is trying to change too many things at one time. I'm very much like heads down, like, let's just do it. You know what I mean? Like, I know long term, I know this is the right move. I know this is the direction we need to move in. Let's just do it and move fast. But that tends to freak people out when even giving people a heads up, still changing a lot of things from what they're used to, their normal routine. That was definitely like a huge area where I probably dropped the ball the most, because I was like leading the charge. That was a big issue. Another one has been, it's a challenge in that like there's so many extra cool things that we're about to build on top of what we have now, but things just take time. And so it's really difficult to almost like release something that in my mind is like half finished, but it's like, well, we have to release it because we're not really supporting the old version anymore. This is the direction we're moving in like 100%, and we're committed to it. And so we just kind of have to release what we have now, and then slowly start to add in a lot of the additional things that are going to make the process easier. So things that seem clunky right now are getting cleaned up, but it's not, like anything, it's not fast enough. It's not ever fast enough or good enough. And that's also kind of like painful to me, because you have to kind of like I said, you kind of have to release something that you're not a million% satisfied with, but it's just kind of, it is what it is. And it's going to be like step one in a much longer kind of journey. So those have been the hardest things for me personally, because it's there's ideal world, and then there's kind of real world, and you have to live in the real world, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it seems like sometimes you have like 5 or 6 options in front of you, and they're all bad. So it's like you choose like the least bad option.
Exactly.
And
Totally.
and one of the options is doing nothing, and you can't do that. You can't let the software just sit and be comfortable and complacent. I mean, for all we know, that's what happened with the previous owners, right? Maybe they just let things sit and they got so bored that they had to get rid of it. Who knows? But so yeah. So I like your philosophy here, where you say, well, it's never going to be 100% perfect, but what's more important is that people start using it. And some people might be mad because one little thing changed. Like I know I get mad if WordPress moves one little thing in the sidebar up a little bit, but people might be a little bit mad. But you're saying what's more important versus the perfection, just get people using the dang thing.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not, obviously it's a rocky road, and we're expecting, I was expecting issues. So it's not like you can't go into it blind. But yeah, there's been some things where we had to change it, maybe to revert the behavior to be a little more like the old app, just kind of like help people use it a lot more efficiently. And then there's other things that we're building in all these additional features, which is great, but additional features often just complicate the process or the workflow. And until we can come back and build on top of that to again, like streamline everything, that's where it's a little bit, it's a little bit clunky in that it's just, it takes a few extra clicks, a few extra steps, but that obviously adds up, and it's not an ideal scenario by any stretch. So it's just kind of like one of those, like, band-aids you have to use in the short term to get over that hump and do something that's a lot better long term.
Yeah, and I think about that a lot. Like even as a user of different software, like you can kind of tell when maybe they have a little bit of a false start or they have to backpedal a little bit. And like what comes to mind is Zapier, where they changed their interface so much, and I can tell like I'm be like, okay, well, it was kind of awkward before, and then now that I can tell what they're trying to go for, but maybe it's like now I'm even more lost about what I do, and I'm almost about to give up, and then I check a couple of weeks later, and it's like, okay, now they added something in there to like bridge the gap and make it easier for me. So even as a user of software, I can see a little bit of that in action, where they're like, okay, we want to add this feature, we want to add this extra power, we want you to be able to do these other things, but we also don't want to get in the way of the speed and the workflow. And sometimes it's like you can't even get there until you make a bunch of mistakes, and then you can get through to the other side. So yeah, so that's interesting to think about. And so you mentioned about adding in new features, adding in new things. So is there anything exciting coming up that you feel like sharing with us about some things that are in the future moving forward for Wordable?
Yeah, definitely. I think a couple of them, like one of them, the additional CMS integration. So BigCommerce, Shopify, Contentful, a lot of these other big ones that people are moving. A lot of times they're moving away from WordPress to even like a tool like Webflow. A lot of people are kind of moving in those directions, and so we're happy to start releasing that stuff. Other things too, better automation. So being able to save your preset. A lot of people will publish to the same site with the same type of settings. So they might want to compress images, or they might not. They might want to open links in a new tab, or they might not. There's all these different like little optimizations that people, once they get into their routine and they start using the same thing, that doesn't change that often. All the content they start putting in will often like take the same formatting. And so being able to save those settings and be a little more like one click, almost like Amazon kind of one click buy type of idea. And then we're also building out not just like the sources to import, but also like better, deeper integrations with Google Docs. So can you like export a document directly from the Google Doc you're working on, as opposed to having to jump inside the app? So just basically like a lot of those things will kind of build on top of that infrastructure we already have, and basically take like the existing experience and make it lightning fast, essentially.
Well, super fun. And yeah, and even just that thought process alone is, how can we remove clicks? How can we get it to one click? I mean, I remember my mind was blown the first time I came across Google Docs so many years ago, and I was like, there's no save button. Whatever happened to the days of I use a Word document and I have to click save, and I forget to click save, I use it. And it was awkward at first, but I was like, man, it's so much easier now, because I don't have to think about what happened, and I don't have to like save every 10 minutes. Like it just happens. And so, so yeah, just even that thought process alone in whatever it is that we do, even like if it's software, if it's dealing with clients or whatever kind of like interface it is, like, can we remove one step here or there just to make it that much smoother to move along? So there's all these good things to think about. And as we're getting to the tail end of our conversation here, Brad, is there some kind of a secret to your success, like with all of your travels and all of your years of business and ups and downs? Is there something that you think people need to know about, or something that maybe you do better than others that just is really missing in the world?
Good question. There is no secret. The two things that kind of come to mind are, one is getting much better at like the boring stuff, like operations. So getting much better at building systems and all that kind of stuff, because that allows me like we have really good teams now in our agencies and stuff where I don't have to get involved. And if I do get involved, I usually screw things up at this point. So they don't want me to get involved. But that means I get to spend the time on new projects like this, like Wordable, because I don't have to be on every call, be on Slack 24 hours a day. I don't have to like do all those things, because I've been able to like build out good systems and processes, and then hire really good people. I think that's a huge part of it, is like just and then rewarding like good people. I guess the other part of it too is like I've basically been working at the same problem for like a decade. And I think people tend to get a little too like shiny object, where If anything, we're just going deeper in the same space. Like we're not like, I'm not opening like a restaurant or a brewery or like all these other fun things that would be awesome on the surface. I'm just like still chipping away at the same problem of like this intersection of content and SEO. And so I think it's not a secret by any stretch, because it's just, I'm not that smart. And if you just do something long enough and keep attacking it from different angles and you just keep at it for a long time, then eventually you'll figure it out.
Well, I like that a lot. I feel like if we were to name this episode, or if someone was to write a book about you, it could be called Get Better at Boring, because there's so much just built into that, right? Because it's like, if it's a boring problem, like it's something that a lot of people like won't even bother with. And if you find a successful solution that's making you money that people are using, like you said, you can go deeper and deeper into it. And you always hear about that entrepreneurial ADD, where a project or a business might be boring for you, but it's still making money and it's still helping others. And I mean, even there's so much in marketing that's just taking something that is boring on the surface, but then you add up all these kinds of, fun psychology and fun language and fun features and fun, like, tutorial videos, demonstrations, things like that. And you make it fun, you make it not boring. And what's boring for you is not boring for other people. So yeah, I think that we could all really learn from that, get better at the boring. And we were talking to Brad Smith from Wordable.io. Do you have any other links, resources, or places to go to plug here today, Brad?
Yeah, Wordable.io is the best. I'm on LinkedIn, but I'm not that active. I think my handle is BS Marketer, because those are my initials. Also, my content agency is Codeless, getcodeless.com, and then Usurp is our PR distribution. That's USERP, like search engine result page, .io. So those are all the places that I'm at. But as I mentioned, I'm not usually too active on the socials, because I'm spending too much time trying to get all these various projects to line up and off the ground and all that.
Yeah, you're busy on the important stuff. And I mean, early on, I was super young once when my mind was blown when one time someone told me, like, you don't have to give away things for free. Like there was a period of time when everyone had an opt-in page, everyone had a free gift, everyone had a free trial. And I had this mentor, I mean, decades ago, who was like, not everyone does that. Like you don't have to have a blog if you don't want to. You don't have to have social media presence if you don't want to. You can try it, and if it works for you and gets you clicks, great. But just because everyone else is doing it, you don't have to be the one that does it. If you have other ways of making money, or if your personality doesn't work there, if you don't want to do it, if you just want to do it, sometimes like you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. So that's a good lesson there, at least for me, listening and talking to you. USERP.io, getcodeless.com, Wordable.io. Go there right now while it's still fresh on your mind. And why not add BS Marketer Brad Smith on social media, even though he might only check every now and then. Well, when he does check, he'll see a message from you saying, hey, I listened to you on the Marketer of the Day podcast. I really like what you said. And Brad will be very impressed the once a month or so he goes and checks it. So why not go to those places, talk to him on social media. And if you are at all dealing with content marketing, if you're an agency of some kind, if you deal with Google Docs or HubSpot or Shopify or WordPress, and you need to use this tool, if this tool sounds good for you and your team, Wordable.io is the place to go. And Brad Smith, super glad talking to you, and thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.